In Unit 3, we're going to be investigating why civilizations trade and how networks of exchange impact the communities they connect. Let's begin by reviewing some key vocabulary that will help us throughout this unit. Make sure you have your class notebook ready and are writing down these terms and definitions. Pause the video when each term comes up, giving yourself time to write it down. If you find the symbols or graphics on the slide helpful to understanding the term, add those to your notes as well. Trade or commerce, the activity of buying and selling, especially on a large scale. Trade or commerce, the activity of buying and selling, especially on a large scale. Networks of exchange. A network of exchange is a web of connections through which people, goods, and ideas circulate. Telephones, the internet, and highways are all networks of exchange. In this unit, we will focus on trade networks. Import and export. An import is something bought and sold in one country that was produced in another. Products bought and sold in the United States that were produced in Japan would be examples of imports. Export, to send something to another country to be sold there. Soybeans produced in the United States and sold to China to be sold there would be a U.S. export. Global age. Generally speaking, a global age refers to a period of time when there's a sense of interconnectedness of all human beings across the globe. In this unit, we're focusing on trade or commerce and how networks of exchange facilitate cultural diffusion. We'll define cultural diffusion a little later in this lesson. That's going to definitely be an important term throughout this unit. The two major post-classical or medieval trade networks were the Silk Roads, connecting east to west, and the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, connecting sub-Saharan Africa with the rest of the African continent, as well as Eurasia. Around 300 BCE to 300 CE, merchants, shippers, sea captains, and empire builders extended and strengthened trade routes across Afro-Eurasia and the Americas. Empire builders had to move troops and supplies, dispatch messages, gather intelligence, and collect taxes. These tasks required good systems of communication and transport by land and sea. These systems were created mainly to serve the empire's government and army, but they also served as highways of commerce, cultural exchange, and migration. The appearance of world religions, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, and Christianity, stimulated cultural interchange across political and cultural boundaries. The Silk Road, Persian Royal Road, Roman roads, and shipping routes combined to form extensive interregional networks of exchange in Afro-Eurasia, meaning across Africa, Europe, and Asia. A wide variety of goods flowed along these networks. The Romans built an extensive network of roads. Over 50,000 miles of paved roads, tracks, and trails radiated from the Forum in the center of Rome to all parts of the empire. Though built primarily to speed troops and supplies, Roman roads were used for commercial purposes too. Goods were shipped to distant provinces and beyond. Constructed by skilled engineers, the roads were strong enough to support half-ton wagons and wide enough to allow two-way traffic. The Silk Roads was a network of roads, tracks, and trails that ran across inner Eurasia. Most of this region is part of the Great Arid Zone, the belt of dry country that extends across Afro-Eurasia. On the Silk Roads, goods changed hands many times. Parthians, Indians, Kushans, Uyghurs, and others acted as middlemen, selling and bartering goods and then taking profits. Caravans passing west carried silk, porcelain, jade, bronze, and spices. Those traveling east shipped gold and silver coins, ivory, gemstones, glassware, and carpets. Why do civilizations trade? Trade is simply the exchange of something for something else. This can be one good for another good, one good for money, one good for a service for a good, money for a service, etc. You get the idea. Trade is an exchange of things. Trade is vital to the success of a civilization. Why? No civilization can produce just enough of everything its people need to survive or live a good life. Usually, people or civilizations trade things they have too much of for things they don't have enough of. This is the classical definition of trade. Now, why would a civilization have too much of something? First of all, what is the something they have too much of? Is it grain or vegetables or rice or some other kind of food? If so, they probably have too much because they planted too much of it to start with, or because the ground proved especially fertile and brought forth a lot more food than was expected. It could also be that the population of the area has dropped since the crop was planted. Whatever the reason, the civilization has too much food. So, what do they do with it? They can save it. If it's grain and they have a granary in ancient times, or a grain silo, a modern day granary, they can store it for use later when the supply of grain might be low. This might not work so well with rice or vegetables or fruit, however. Then what? Well, then the people have to do something with that extra food. They will either sell it, exchange it, or give it away. If they decide to sell it, then they will expect money or some kind of wealth in exchange. If they decide to exchange it, then they will expect some other kind of food or some other kind of good in return. And if they decide to give it away, then they will expect the gratitude of the people who receive this gift. This, at its simplest level, is trade, exchanging one thing for another. Civilizations of yesterday and today have thrived because they were able to work out agreements to get what they didn't have from other people and give what they did have to other people, often at the same time. This is true for other goods besides food. Machinery, oil, cars, plastics, and electronics are all examples of things that one civilization produces to sell, exchange, or give to another civilization. Nearly every single day, trade keeps civilizations prospering. Planes land and take off, ships dock and leave port, trucks unload and load again, all bringing goods from one people to another and taking other goods to other people. Often, trade involves many civilizations at the same time. The grain farmers of the American Midwest might sell their grain to rice farmers in Southeast Asia, who sell their rice to people in China and Japan. The Chinese and Japanese people might eat the rice to keep them healthy so they can go to work at automobile factories where they make cars that they sell to the grain farmers in the American Midwest. Trade circles aren't always this perfect. One country might sell its good to a country from which it doesn't accept anything in return. It all depends on the needs of its people. Let's get back to our key definitions. And remember, this one is definitely going to be important all throughout Unit 3. Cultural diffusion is the spread of one culture's practices, beliefs, and/or cultural artifacts like food, music, or tools to another group of people or place. I'll say that again. Cultural diffusion is the spread of one culture's practices, beliefs, and/or cultural artifacts like food, music, or tools to another group of people or place. Along the trade routes of the post-classical era, the Silk Roads and trans-Saharan trade networks, cultural diffusion often took place when travelers from all over Africa, Europe, and Asia stopped along their journeys to rest at the same caravanserai, a roadside inn with a central courtyard for travelers in the desert regions of Asia or North Africa. This allowed for the exchange of ideas between these very different world regions that would not have been possible without traders making the journeys that connected them. Because of long-distance trade, civilizations from East and West could both learn from each other's innovations and creativity. Let's take a quick look around what a caravanserai might look like, because I have a feeling that's a term new to many of you. A caravanserai, as we said, was a roadside inn as travelers were passing through the deserts in Central Asia or throughout the Sahara in Africa. These giant doorways that you see are where camels would pass through. That's why they're so large. And then the different stalls are for travelers, traders, and merchants to stay for the evening, for a couple of days with their camels to rest and recover before continuing along their journey, since they would be traveling on foot through these hot deserts and over many, many miles. And so travelers, once again, from many different places would all kind of meet up here at this caravanserai. And while they were hanging out, feeding their camels, giving their camels a rest, they would chat with each other. And that's when they might share a book from their culture. They might share cloth or tools from their culture. Someone might go over to you reading from the Islamic texts and ask you about that faith. Now you're interested, perhaps you borrow it, or at least now you're aware of the Quran. And when you go back home, miles and miles away to your people, you tell them about it or you share the ideas with them. You show them the cloth or the spices and tell them about the people that you met on your journey. And then if people in your place become interested, they might adopt those beliefs or foods or styles of music or dance or tools into your local culture. That is cultural diffusion. An important example of cultural diffusion from the medieval period and relating to the case study of the Trans-Saharan Trade Network that we're going to be focusing on in Unit 3 is the spread of Islam in North Africa. Islam was founded by the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca, which is modern-day Saudi Arabia. This over here. This is where the Middle East meets the African continent. Islam is not only a religion. Islam provides guidance for all aspects of life. For at least 6 centuries, Islam spread largely peacefully and gradually wherever there were trade connections with the wider Muslim world of the southern Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, and the Arabian Sea. Following the conquest of North Africa by Muslim Arabs in the 7th century, or the 600s, Islam spread throughout West Africa via merchants, traders, scholars, and missionaries. That is, largely through peaceful means, whereby African rulers either tolerated the religion or converted to it themselves. The religion was not adopted uniformly. It often existed alongside traditional practices and rituals. With the religion of Islam came other ideas too, especially those concerning government administration, law, architecture, and many other aspects of daily life. It's perhaps understandable then why so many African rulers and elites were ready to adopt a foreign religion when it also brought with it definite advantages for governance and for wealth. Aside from genuine spiritual conviction, meaning genuinely believing in the Islamic faith, African leaders may have recognized that adopting Islam, or at least tolerating it, would be beneficial to trade and therefore make them wealthy. Another motivation for rulers to adopt Islam, besides greater riches with which to impress their people and hold on to power, was that adopting Islam also allowed the exchange of diplomatic embassies with North African states, as well as the possibility to send scholars for training, both of which brought the sub-Saharan states, those below the Sahara Desert, in contact with the wider Mediterranean world and increased the prestige of their rulers. Yet another appeal of Islam was that it brought literacy, a tremendously useful tool for empires who built their wealth on trade.